Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Josh Goodbody and I'm the COO here at Qredo. Today we're talking institutional DeFi, and what better way for us to tackle this than with our friends at MetaMask. So I'm joined by Johann Bornman, product lead for MetaMask Institutional. Johann, a big welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Josh. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Super stuff. So before we kick off, Johann, do you want to maybe just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the product lead for MetaMask Institutional, as noted. My background is in traditional finance. Started my career in London sort of 15 years ago. Started in, of all places, structured finance in Deutsche Bank. That was sort of my first role out of university. This is pertinent for a particular reason. But I had done financial analysis undergrad and postgrad at university, and I always wanted to manage money. And was very lucky enough that a guy that had been running his own hedge fund was asked to start and build an investment business for a bank. He hired me, and then the two of us essentially built out that business over a 6-year period, from a piece of paper to running quite a few billion in asset under management, building global macro portfolios, and investing across all asset classes. I then had a sort of a profound view and changed the world around 2013, 2014, and sort of realized software is eating the world. And then had moved into a place called Makers Academy to learn full stack development, to marry essentially technology and finance, and found my way to a robo-advisor as director of product, where I built the company's investment engine, helped them scale across Europe. We were sort of just gotten our FCA license in 16 European countries, and then helped the company scale across 32 European markets. Did that for a few years, and then stepped out to build my own fintech business, raise capital, put a team in place, and then stepped out last year to essentially join Consensus, and been in a very fortunate position to step in and lead MetaMask Institutional.
Awesome. What a great journey. It's seeming to be quite a common theme, isn't it? That myself included, that you come from finance, and at some point you have this moment of, wow, okay, right, I'm going to get involved in that space. It's a growing area, and people are flooding into the space of traditional finance. So definitely a topical theme, I think, because today, we released the announcement that MetaMask Institutional was kind of relaunching itself with this select handful of custodial partners. So a big milestone for DeFi and also for MetaMask. For you folks, how big a milestone was this? How has the whole process been in working towards this announcement?
I think it's sort of been a long time coming in terms of, we have so many institutions that we work with today that have wanted to hear about this announcement, and it's been quite tough for keeping them back. So we're obviously delighted to be able to actually talk about it. I think, we've been working very hard to make sure that we find the right partners that can address the needs of the entire sort of institutional space. And that obviously focuses on, partners like Qredo, as well as, partners like, the qualified custodians that we'll be working with. We initially had a partner in terms of working with a Curve, which is obviously an MPC solution as well. And so we've been very much focused over the last several months to make sure that we work with and integrated partners that can, again, address the entire needs of the institutional space.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah. And every participant or entrant into the DeFi market has a slightly different requirement when they come in. Some really want to move nimbly and use a self-custodial wallet. Qredo is perfectly suited. Others have fiduciary obligations or regulatory obligations. They've got to use a qualified custodian. Did you kind of find it a challenge when you were going through the process trying to find various solutions, or were you actually quite, impressed at the breadth of solutions that are out there on the market today?
Yeah, I think there are obviously a breadth of solutions in the market today. What we've found is that, the custodian market has obviously heated up over the last 18 months. And for those of us who come from a traditional financial background, no offense, the custody market can be quite sort of a boring business to be in. But in crypto, it's sort of the exact opposite. We're obviously seeing a ton of new players come into the space, a lot of investments, a lot of M&A. And I think, we've obviously seen a lot of innovation over the last 18 months, specifically within sort of the MPC technology stack. And that's really allowed, I think, dare I say, the crossing of the chasm for institutions to step into DeFi more actively. And obviously, Qredo is very much part of that innovation. I think what we saw is obviously a lot of players in the market, But I think it's very important to, think very deeply about how to segment the market. And then I think very important when you're building product, what are the needs that you're addressing? And that then, points to the sort of phrasing and sort of mental model that you mentioned earlier, which is that there are different segments of the markets within the institutional space that obviously need different qualified custodians, custody tech stacks. And so I think, we saw a lot. We looked at a lot of solutions in the market, but I think we were very impressed with the handful of partners that we've been very lucky enough to work with.
Brilliant. Very, very exciting. So in terms of wider adoption, I think it's fair to say that we're seeing DeFi being front and center of innovation in the crypto space. And MetaMask itself recently announced that it hit 10 million users, which is a massive milestone that denotes a huge amount of adoption. Now, if we talk about the institutional side, the MetaMask Institutional product seems like a perfect time for this to come to the market. I look across all of the different events happening across the space, and there's always a prime time slot talking about institutional DeFi or how institutions can get into DeFi. So how much demand have you seen in the market?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's probably two ways to think about demand generally. There is probably the demand one sees initially, which is the demand that then drives the hypothesis or the initial build of a product. And there's obviously the demand that you see after, once you've actually built the business or the product. And as you know very well, and no doubt your viewers and listeners as well, that it's not very frequent that demand stays constant. In fact, it's quite the norm that it drops off. And I think, we're in a very, very fortunate position that we've seen kind of that not just growth, but really exponential growth. And I think that's driven by, say, two sort of key things. One is obviously the macro trend, and I think this is what you're raising now. Obviously, we're seeing this giant institutional adoption of DeFi and just really the growth of DeFi generally, which is obviously this massive wave. And then obviously on top of that, you have the surfboard or the sailing boat. Hat tip to Anthony, your CEO. And that's obviously then the vessel that can ride this wave. And I think these two things, we've been very fortunate enough to be part of. I think MetaMask, and this is again a giant hat tip to the MetaMask team who have built a product that is ubiquitous in the space. 10 million monthly active users obviously points to this. But we're seeing permissionless innovation. We're seeing 1,000 flowers blooming, and that is obviously drawing exponential growth within DeFi generally. And then tied to that, you're seeing obviously the adoption of institutions moving into the space. And I think these two things have very much driven the fact that we've seen massive adoption within MMI from the initial launch, from the initial build until obviously the wonderful announcements we're doing today.
Yeah, amazing. And I think we on our side have been, I think, surprised actually at the amount of inbound requests that we've had that relate to DeFi. And the question has always been, what are you going to do about DeFi? You're a decentralized custodial solution. You've got these settlement functionalities. You can plug into DeFi, we would imagine. And we've all said, yeah, it's on our roadmap. It's part of our plan. And, we're building something quite powerful with the right folks to do this. And so now for us, it's a real relief that we can publicly talk about it, because for us, it kind of, it closes the loop. We always thought that this kind of solution that we've built is really appropriate for being the kind of jump off point for assets into the market. So now it's time to prove that thesis. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, and just sort of to add to that, I think, for those of us who started our careers in finance and saw what happened in 2008 and, obviously the European banking crisis after that, I think there's so much potential for DeFi to be a fundamental breakthrough within financial services generally. And I think that, this is exactly what we're seeing now. We're seeing permissionless innovation, and we're seeing this fundamentally re-architecting and rebuilding the financial services sector from first principles. And I think that's why there's such massive interest from institutions. Yes, there's an aspect of obviously change-seeking returns in the space, and stepping into this market to earn APYs and manage their crypto funds. But I think there's actually something deeply profound behind this as well. And so, there's obviously the quote from Mark Andreessen that says software eats the world, or software is eating the world. For us in the space, I think we would sort of qualify that and say, Web3 is eating the world. And I think that really means that, it's not a question of when well, it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's a question of when. And I think, this is very much, we're in not even the first innings of just how profound effect this world is going to have on financial services across the world.
Yeah, no, fully agree. It's a pretty transformational time for finance, and it's interesting to see who's adopting it and who's fighting it. I think that's one of the things that's constantly fascinating for me, seeing the massive adoption by some of the folks that originally were quite bearish about it. But there are still holdouts. There are some holdouts that do not see this as a transformational moment for finance. And I think, we are, fortunate enough to be right in the weeds of it. We understand it and we understand what's possible. I think for many, they're still on that learning journey. So it's early days, but it's certainly very exciting days for us. Now, in terms of the process that you guys have gone through in selecting different custodial partners for MMI, from a custodial perspective, from a product perspective, what was it about the Qredo offering that made sense for a partnership for you?
Yeah, I think when one thinks of institutional DeFi and really just what institutions need and what they want, I think if you can boil it down from first principles to risk, and that entails obviously understanding risk, pricing risk, taking position in risk, and then obviously very importantly managing risk. Mm-hmm. And then that last piece, when you think about managing risk, I think that very much then obviously boils down to key management, specifically within crypto and very importantly within DeFi. Now, again, there are different solutions in the market that cater to different types of key management. And there's also very important on top of that, kind of the governance layer that goes with that key management. And obviously we've seen MPC being quite a breakthrough technology over the last 18, 24 months, specifically within the institutional crypto space and institutional DeFi, allowing institutions to access this technology in this market and allowing them to kind of manage that risk. I think obviously today there are a bunch of providers in the market that offer these MPC solutions. But if you look at the architecture of Qredo, obviously we have something quite unique there in the fact that it's not just the dare I say decentralization of the signing and the key management, but it's actually the decentralization of the database, the record, the ledger of record. And I think we would say we would probably share a lot of values with you in the fact that if we believe that finance should be decentralized, I think it's very important to be thinking about, well, what does the architecture stack look like in terms of that risk management? And that obviously boils down to not just the key management, the governance layer, but also the ledger of record. And so I think, there are no doubt, as I mentioned, a variety of different MPC providers in the market today. I think, Qredo was very unique in terms of the technology stack that it offers today. And I think it's a beautiful synergy between MetaMask Institutional allowing access and unrivaled access to DeFi in this decentralized financial world, and then obviously decentralized risk management for institutions. And I think that combination is very unique, specifically going after different segments of the market that often need very particular types of risk management, which entails obviously fast signing, cost-effective signing. And again, that governance layer, as I mentioned, being absolutely critical.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said it better than I could definitely say. I think that you've hit the nail on the head in terms of what we've tried to bring to the partnership, and that kind of flexibility of the solution, the open architecture that underpins it, we see as a true differentiator, and we're just so pleased that you folks also see that as well. And it's really interesting seeing the plethora of solutions that have been built, but on this really legacy or even centralized architecture. And some of it makes sense. I totally understand it for some market segments, but for crypto in particular, we don't want to be replicating the existing structures in traditional finance. There are some that make perfect sense. There are others that don't make sense. So, we've tried to build with decentralization being our kind of primary goal. And as you say, things like decentralizing the way that the MPC nodes operate, decentralizing the way that the ledger of ownership is held, i.e. not on the SQL database as most MPC solutions do it, but we do it on our layer 2 blockchain. So all of these differentiators we think are hopefully going to be really front and center of this kind of wave of institutional adoption. Now, if we zoom out for a second and we talk about the challenges, and I think this is a really interesting point for folks watching this, they'll be looking at what people are doing today with MetaMask, and very well known, as you said, ubiquitous product. If you look at MetaMask Institutional, what kind of challenges do firms face that MetaMask Institutional can really help them fix?
Yeah, maybe my sort of initial mental model is quite helpful to repeat. I think, firms need and want access. They want exposure to this asset class, this technology. They need to understand the risk. They need to price that risk, take a position of that risk, and then very importantly, obviously manage that risk. And I think, there's obviously different ways to access the market today. One can do it through centralized exchanges. But if you're talking about DeFi, I think, again, we're in a very fortunate position that there's only really one wallet that can offer unrivaled access. Now, today, I think it's hard to keep count, but sort of estimates are between sort of 15 to 17,000 projects and protocols that exist today. And obviously, we have not just mainnet, but we have all EVM compatible chains. And so I think, again, what MetaMask Institutional does is gives you institutions unrivaled access to those 15 to 17,000 projects and protocols across not just mainnet, but all EVM compatible chains. So it's access to the asset class, access to the technology, access to risk, which is obviously absolutely key. Now, again, that's very much, I'd say one half of this equation. The other half, very importantly, is, of course, the risk management piece. And that, again, focuses on who are custodian partners? How do institutions manage their keys, the governance layers, who signs transactions, and how can they sort of, build risk management in line with what they need to obviously not just raise capital, but actually manage their organizations. And I think MMI is very much the combination of those two things. Ideally, the best of both. It is not just unrivaled access to DeFi, very importantly, but by connecting to these fantastic custodian partners that we have, it gives institutions that risk management layer that they need. And so kind of the mental model that we have around this is, and the way that I phrase it when I talk to clients, is that it's unrivaled access to DeFi without them having to compromise on their institutional required safety, compliance, and security.
Brilliant. Amazing. So in terms of looking forward, without putting you on the spot, what kind of evolution do you see for the MetaMask Institutional product? What are the kind of areas that you're looking at, whether it's tax or other things?
Yeah, so this is probably a topic that I'm sort of deeply excited and passionate about. My team and I are doing a bunch of work at the moment in terms of not just our roadmap for the next quarter, but obviously then looking out for 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months ahead. One aspect that I might sound like a broken record on is we think very deeply about this capital allocation stack. And this is very much for thinking through how organizations do their research analysis piece, how do they do their pre-trade compliance, how do they execute their positions, monitor those holdings, the reporting requirements that they have, and then obviously lastly, very important, custody. And then that transaction flow process, you can sort of put in a capital allocation stack. And we think very deeply about user needs in that capital allocation stack. And obviously for a bunch of those layers, we work very closely with partners like yourselves. Obviously that translates into custody, but there are very particular layers in that stack that I would say Consensus and Codify, which is, I would say, the fintech division within Consensus, we are in a very unique position to solve. And so what we are thinking about very deeply at the moment and actually building is a lot of innovation across that capital allocation stack. And so what folks will see within the next 90 days is a lot of innovation, not just in the extension itself, which is MMI today, but actually a lot of innovation outside the extension. And that entails us obviously thinking very deeply and delivering for user needs across, as I mentioned, whether it might be execution, monitoring, reporting, all those good things. And so, yeah, it's going to be an exciting 19 days. I will say stay tuned.
Super. Sounds really, really exciting. And in terms of the rollout strategy, how do you see this progressing over the next couple of months?
Yeah, so I think, today is obviously a really exciting day. We've have this announcement we've been sitting on for a while, go public. I think, again, we're absolutely delighted to be working with Qredo. I think this offers such a new capabilities in terms of addressing the needs for very particular segments of the market. I think the way we approach, custody generally is that we are very custodian agnostic. And we've been very fortunate enough to, put partnerships in place with what we think are the best in breed technology in the space. And that really, again, and when we think about product, I think about users. This allows us to solve user needs across the institutional space. So we're starting with different custodians in different jurisdictions with different technology stacks. Qredo obviously being our preferred partner within the MPC space. And this obviously allows us to go after very particular segments of the markets. And then off the top of that, we're obviously working with custodians in qualified custodians in other jurisdictions, again, to address the needs of the entire enterprise world. And so no doubt what we're going to be seeing is probably quite a bit of inbound over the next sort of 30 or 60, 90 days, working very closely with partners like yourself to also evolve the product from where it is today. I think, I would say that our partnership is very much getting started in the first version of this product. I think what we can do together is almost limitless in terms of, not just fast execution, risk management, the reporting piece, like all those things that I talked about in the capital allocation stack. And I think it's been a delight to work with your team because I think we both, both our organizations think very deeply about what is the best product experience that we can possibly build. And that obviously is going to entail, much faster execution, much faster signing, much faster access. And so I could say we're just getting started.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the beginning of a long and hopefully really fruitful journey. And, we're going to learn a lot is how we see it. This is such an exciting opportunity to gather a huge amount of feedback from, some of the largest power users and even, new users of the DeFi space. So I'm sure we're going to be gathering really valuable feedback that will make meaningful results or impacts on our respective products. And I think that is an area that we'd be super keen to keep everyone up to date with. So without putting you on the spot again, we'd love to have you back on and talk a little bit about, some of the learnings that we've had over the last few months. So in a few months, we'd love to get you back on and we'll talk a little bit about how things have gone.
Amazing. Would be delighted to do so.
Great stuff. Okay, well, thank you for joining us, Johann. It's been a real pleasure, and thanks to the MetaMask Institutional team as well. As always, for you watching today, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you very soon.